Hello everyone, bringing you an unboxing video today, which isn't truly an unboxing video because the items have been partially unpacked, but the reason for that is they're sent to get over in a very large package for both myself and Ed Hallett, who some may be aware of. He runs a blog called Tales from the Supply Depot, and no doubt some of the items he's received will be up on there and show up on his blog at some point. I'll put a link to that down below in a pinned comment. It's worth going and having a look at. So, very kindly, Ed has been holding on to these bits and pieces for me. The items have all come over from Australia, and a friend over there, Steve Cheers, very kindly got these bits together for us and helped sort everything out and then shipped them over to us in one big batch over to Ed's address. Recently, of course, I've been down to Kent, which included a trip eastwards over the Pennines. Ed lives over that way, so it made sense to drop into his on the way round and pick up these bits and pieces. So thank you very much for holding on to them for me, Ed. And thank you very much for organising all of this in the first place, Steve. Without further ado, we'll get into the main part of the video now and have a look at what's arrived. The pack is an unissued example, and this is a British manufacturer. If we just have a look under the flap here, I can show you there. B Limited, 1941. You can see the broad arrow in the centre there. And this is in lovely condition, as I say, unissued. There's no marks or anything on this as far as I can see, just slight corrosion on the buckles and things, which is what you would expect for something of this age. It's chock full of stuff, so I'll move this to one side and we can start to have a look at the contents. Move that right around to the side there. First thing in the top here is a Australian made 1937 pattern holster. You can see the D, broad arrow D under the flap there in typical Australian purple printing, and you can make out the, is it GGH Limited? Or GGH and Company, rather, sorry. I think there, under the flap, a little bit difficult to tell. I'm not great on Commonwealth webbing manufacturers, or British Empire webbing manufacturers, but other than Barter, which is obviously a very easy one from India, and ZL9T Limited, which is very prolific for Canadian web equipment. Otherwise, the features and so forth are exactly the same as British manufacturer. The C-hooks are slightly different shape. You've got the one for the belt there and then one to clip into the ammunition pouch when they're worn together. Drainage eyelet at the bottom there. This very stripy webbing, very similar to Indian webbing, and my understanding is quite a lot of Indian webbing was shipped over to Australia to be manufactured into web equipment, which is why that's one reason you see that with the shared streak in the cotton webbing there. It's a very common thing to see in both Australian manufactured and Indian manufactured web equipment, and my understanding is that part of that at least is due to some of the Indian webbing being shipped over to actually be manufactured into components, so just shipped over as sheet webbing and then just shipped over to Australia as sheets of webbing and then actually sewn into the final form of what you want to make from it in Australia. So Australian holster there, very, very nice, again unissued, and followed by a Canadian holster. You can see that here, again very nice clear stamp under the flap there. ZL9T Limited, again 1943, very, very prolific manufacturer. As I say, interesting take on the design with the rounded off flap there. You've got the edging all the way around the sides there. Otherwise, the fixtures on the back are the same. You can see that there with the belt hooks and then the hook to hook into the ammunition pouch worn above. And then you can see here the drainage eyelet in the bottom there. The next thing we have here is a post-war item. This is a Hexi Stove. Very similar to the British Hexi Stove, but this is an Australian made example. So this is an early example in the gold finish. The one I had previously was in silver, so it's nice to have this. Very, very bright lacquered gold finish. And in contrast to British stoves, which had a slightly more rounded point on each of these, the Australian ones are very angular. So that's a detail difference, and one that's not particularly noticeable, but it's nice to have a proper Australian early Hexi stove to go along with my Vietnam War kit. Very nice to have one of those. That was a separate purchase on eBay, which Steve very kindly has combined in with this lot when sending it all over. Then we have some more things of that sort of era. We have here a very tidy pair of Australian modified M1956 ammunition pouches, which you can see here, the SLR pouches. They are obviously lengthened from standard, or heightened from standard M1956 talked about previously on the channel. Nothing different about these from those that have been looked at previously. They're just a particularly nice clean pair, which I wanted. Obviously slight differences there in the dark green versus the sort of olive green used for the straps at the top there. Just manufacturing variations, but two very nice clean examples, which is just what I was after. The ones I have, even the ones I use, are slightly worn, slightly past their best, shall we say. Beyond just worn, they are a little bit delicate in parts, so it's nice to have a nice clean pair to go in the collection there. And then we've got some more M1956 bits and pieces in here. We have a pair, put these side by side here. We have a pair of early M1956 pouches, and these are both, it's not particularly clear on this one, but if I bring it up to the camera you can possibly see the stamp in the center there. This one, it's very clear. These are both D, broad arrow D marked, as you can see. And we have obviously the standard design. They are manufactured in the US. I'll get a close up of the stamp under the flap here, if I can get that here. They are US manufactured, but to Australian contracts. So they're manufactured for the Australian Army. When they adopted M1956, they started out using US manufactured M1956, but with the Defense Department stamp worked in place of US on the front there. So really nice to have a pair of these. They're not particularly common, so it's really nice to have a pair to add to the collection of US manufactured M1956, but manufactured for Australia prior to the Vietnam War. There are some other bits and pieces marked up in this way in what's arrived, in with what's arrived. Hopefully at some point I'll be able to put together a full set of this equipment, or as close to that as possible. As I say previously in videos, I've used US manufactured, US marked M1956 in its place. It'd be nice to improve things by being able to use some of this equipment at least. So yes, nice to have those. Very, very nice to add to the collection. So what else do we have in here? We have, again, a very tidy, unissued, this is a post-Vietnam example, but the Australian modified butt pack, or bum pack in Australian parlance, the M1961, the enlarged version. It was used by Australian forces right the way through into the 1980s. And as we see under the flap here, this particular example is dated 85. You can see that there, with the stores code above, the NATO stock number above, rather, or national stock number, or whichever. And PCG Melbourne, the manufacturer there. The broad arrow having moved under the flap on earlier examples, it's found on the front of the flap here. But that's a really nice, clean example, unissued, very, very tidy. Again, a nice thing to add to the collection. Very nice indeed. What else do we have in here? So we have some more webbing components in here. We have what's colloquially referred to as the Spider. It's a sleeping bag carrier which goes with the M1956 equipment. I believe we do have some markings on the strap there. There we go, you have carrier sleeping bag. You can see that there. Somewhere on here there should be, I think, a DD stamp as well, though where that is on all these myriad straps which make up the sleeping bag carrier, I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to have a closer look at this. But anyway, that's what it is, a US manufactured example, but I believe this is a DD marked one somewhere on the straps. So sleeping bag carrier there. The next thing we'll look at here is a set of M1956 suspenders. These are the first patterns you can see here. We have hooks at the back and hooks at the front. They don't yet have the snap hooks. And these are, again, if you look on here, it's very, very faint, but they are DD marked. You can just see the stamp there with the broad arrow in the center, I believe. It's very, very faint, but again, we should have markings on the inside here. I think they've all worn away. The only problem with this stuff when it gets used, obviously the stamps often rub off, but a set of the early suspenders there, again part of the DD marked Australian equipment, Australian M1956. And then an interesting component, I now have a couple of these. The Australian Army used 1937 pattern after the introduction of M1956. M1956 for a time at least was very much what was issued to men going into the field, in training and so forth. 1937 pattern remained in service. So the problem arose of using the new plastic water bottles associated with the M1956 equipment, the introduction of the M1956 in the 1937 pattern carriers. And something that was developed as part of this was a felt cover, which you can see here, little Australian green press studs or snaps on the sides there. big broad arrow on the back there, and this is designed to go over the plastic water bottle, the standard, basically US type plastic water bottle, which were of course manufactured in Australia as well. And then this can then go in the 1937 pattern carrier. I haven't actually seen photographs of these in use. I've seen the plastic bottles being carried in the 1937 pattern carriers, so whether these were really bothered with, I'm not entirely sure, but nevertheless an interesting little piece of design there, in that they are intended to go over the bottle, the plastic bottle, before it goes into the 1937 pattern carrier. But I say it's basically a removable cover in the style of the preceding enamel water bottles, basically made in the same sort of drab felt material. So one of those there. And there's more, yet more. Aha, a nice clean set of later Australian M1956 shoulder straps. You can see they have this nylon material for the padding on the inside there. Bring that up to the camera there. You can see hopefully see the weave of that. And just a nice clean set of those, which is a good thing to have. I say Australian equipment, when you find it in unworn or nearly unworn condition, it's nice to pick it up because a lot of it got used to death. So nice to have a pair of those there in nice clean condition, nice clean and tidy condition. And continue digging. Ah yes, now I do have one of these already, but there's another one been thrown in here. Rather strange Australian marked. You can see the broad arrow on the metalwork there. Nylon web belt, and I've not got to the bottom of what these are about, you know, when they were introduced and why. They are Australian M1956 basically, but made in nylon, so equivalent to the M1967 in US service. But yeah, vertical weave nylon web belt there with Australian marked fittings, in that they have the broad arrow on them there. So quite a strange thing. I say I have two of these now, which is I say what it'd be good to get to the bottom of exactly what they are and what they were used for. And then we have in here have a look at this here. I think this again you can see is Australian marked. We have the broad arrow on the metalwork here. Not sure if there are stamps buried away somewhere underneath the doubled over section there, but a horizontal weave Australian M1956 belt, which I believe are post-Vietnam. I think Australian manufactured examples used during the Vietnam War were the vertical weave, and then they switched over to the horizontal weave post-war, if I remember correctly. I would need to double check that though, so don't take that as gospel. So Australian M1956 belt there. And there's a few bits left in the bottom here. We have both Australian late manufactured, you can see how late this is, 1961, 1937 pattern frog there, with obviously the darker bit of webbing used for the top loop there. And I say I do have one of these already, but another one of these, the Australian frog for use with the M1956, which includes the hanger hooks there, so it can actually be hung on the belt using hanger hooks. The other example I have has a broad arrow, this one doesn't, so that's just a manufacturing variation of whether or not they got stamped up with a broad arrow or not. Otherwise there are no other visible markings on this at all, but that's what it's designed for. It's essentially this design slightly modified to have the hanger hooks added on to use with the M1956 pistol belt. So there we are, a couple of Australian manufactured frogs as well. So the pack, we'll just have another quick look at this now. It's empty. You can see this is a standard British pack, or 1908 and latterly 1937 pattern pack. All the standard fixtures and fittings, and as I say, dated 1941, as you can see under the flap there. So just a really nice example of one of those. So that is it for this little lot. Thank you very much again, Steve, and thank you very much, Ed, for assistance in getting all this stuff over. There are some really nice additions to the collection there. Thank you very much indeed. So there we are. I hope you found it interesting looking through those bits and pieces. Obviously things which will hopefully show up in videos going forward. Some really nice additions to the collection there. I'm very pleased with this batch of bits and pieces which have arrived from the Antipodes. Thank you very much indeed, once again, Steve, for your assistance. And again, thanks very much, Ed, to hanging onto these bits and pieces for me until I could make my way over to your place and pick them up. If you have found it interesting looking through these and you'd like to see more from the channel, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the little notification button down below, and that will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as ever, thank you very much everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. As I always say, it is greatly appreciated. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down below as well. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.